Who said that magic cannot happen? Look at me, look at the stage. This is called magic. Ladies and gentlemen, what I recognize, I energize. The greatest magic in the world is not created by changing your face. It happens when you change the words that you believe about yourself. And that reminds me of a story about an eagle's egg that accidentally fell into the chicken's farm. The farmer picked it up and placed it along with the chicken eggs. And a few weeks later, it so happened that the eagle hatched along with the chicks. And it so happened it grew with them, it walked like them, it ate what they ate. And, whenever the chicken flapped their wings few feet off the ground, even the eagle did the same. And it so happened that, one day it looked up the sky and saw a magnificent bird, soaring high above the mountains. And, the young eagle kind of asked like, hey, who's that? And the chicken replied, that's an eagle, the king of the skies. So don't even bother looking at it because you cannot become that. Ladies and gentlemen, since then, the eagle believed and spent its entire life that, it is just a chicken. Not that it kind of lacked wings or strength or potential, but it believed a story that was never meant to be true. Ladies and gentlemen, I often wonder how many of us are kind of, living exactly like that eagle. Not that we kind of lack talent or intelligence, but somewhere down the journey, we kind of accepted words that were never meant to define us. Words like, I'm not good enough. I don't think you are capable of doing the things that the people are kind of doing out. I know this because I was like that eagle. Let me go back to my childhood. During my infant, I kind of had this, speech impediment problem. I couldn't speak clearly, right? And then when I came to my teenage, I had a lot of pimples and it was quite a pocky kind of a face. I was short and I'm kind of still short, right? And it so happened that, people kind of used to call me like, hey, short fellow, hey, pimply, right? And kind of said like, will this guy ever look good? And all these things kind of had a very severe impact over me. And it did affect my self-esteem. It did affect my self-image. And it did affect my self-confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, words have power. When you repeatedly keep listening to the same thing again and again and again, it so happens, and when you stop questioning them, you tend to start believing in it. And I literally struggled with it. I used to compare myself with people who look cooler, taller, handsomer, and more confident. And whenever I made that comparison, it always made me look smaller. Ladies and gentlemen, yet today, I stand before you as a coach, as a motivational speaker, as an author of empowering words, and as a TEDx speaker. Yeah, you can clap, right? Thank you. I love that, because what goes around comes around. Ladies and gentlemen, what changed? Not my look, not my height, but what changed is my perspective. And I would like to quote this word from the scripture that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And I applied this principle in every aspect of my life. And this literally changed my entire perspective of my life. And that inspired me a powerful framework, which I call as a STAR, S-T-A-R. Because I believe everyone sitting over here, everyone watching me and will be watching me as a star, not because you're a star like me, because you carry a light within. So let's see what does STAR really stand for. See yourself differently. Now, there is a quote of Reverend Ike that literally transformed my life. It goes this way, that if you want to be something in life, you got to see yourself in your mind being it. Wow. Isn't that crazy? Imagine that for a moment, right? Everything in this world is kind of created twice. First in our mind and then in reality, right? Now, before this building exists, right, it exists in the architect's mind. Before the book is written, it exists in the author's mind. Before the leaders emerge, leadership exists in their mind. Before I could stand over here as a TEDx speaker, I had to see myself as one of them. Before somebody believed in me, I had to believe in myself. Ladies and gentlemen, the eagle didn't need, the new wings or strength or potential. All it needed was a new mirror. I'm not asking you to go and buy a new mirror. What I'm saying is, the problem is not on the mirror on your wall. The problem is the mirror in your mind. Many of us are looking at ourselves through wrong mirrors. Mirrors that are created through rejection, criticism, separation. And I really want to focus on this point that, when someone kind of calls you weak, that is their word. When someone has rejected you, that is their decision. When someone has laughed at you, that's their reaction. And if somebody has kind of failed in the exam, it is just an event, it's not an end. It's very sad to see that 7.6% of the students commit suicide every year because they fail in an exam. And I want to make it very evident, I failed many times, right? I failed many interviews. My business ideas kind of didn't work. I did have many breakups, and I'm really proud to say that, right? It kind of makes me really strong. Okay, you can smile because I cannot see you, right? And, bad presentations I had, and people's opinion definitely is not your identity. What I'm trying to say is, an event is not your identity. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand that, many people are kind of allowing temporary experiences to becoming a permanent definition. Sachin Tendulkar is called as a god of cricket, but what created that magic? The combination of right skill set with right mindset. Had he focused on his height, I don't think history would have ever remembered Sachin Tendulkar. So please remember this, the day your perspective changes, your possibility changes. The day your self-image changes, your life changes. Let's move on to the next point. Talk to yourself differently. Now imagine a child trying to walk for the first time. It kind of gets up, it falls, and then tries again, it falls. Do you look at the child and say like, hey, enough is enough. I don't think, you'll be able to do it. Walking is not for you. Or would you kind of look at the child and say like, wow, try it. Because you know that very fall is going to enable the child to walk. Ladies and gentlemen, what happens to us when we become an adult? Why do we stop showing the same kindness? When we make a mistake, we kind of say, I'm useless. But can I ask you one question? What is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself? Because eventually you will become that story. Words become beliefs, beliefs become action, and action becomes your destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share this, personal experience. When you speak to yourself, you're actually speaking to the very divine presence within you. Because I believe that the Almighty resides in each and every one of us. I'm actually getting that goosebumps. And when you feel that, ladies and gentlemen, when you feel that, and when you speak with faith instead of fear, something extraordinary happens. You tend to love yourself. You'll start forgiving others. You'll let go of ego, anger, unforgiveness. And when people kind of criticize you, mock you, or try to put you down, nothing of those things will affect you because you understood the real you, because you understood what you really mean. Ladies and gentlemen, every one of us want the best, but if you really want the best, you must believe that you deserve the best. And that is possible with the words that you talk to yourself. The words that I kind of tell to myself is, I am powerful. I am successful. I am a powerful public speaker. Powerful words are not the words that are spoken by others to you. They are the words that are spoken by you to you. So remember this. The words that you speak to yourself is the story that you're telling to yourself. And the story that you're telling to yourself is the life that you will live. So ask yourself, what is the story that you're telling to yourself? Appreciate your journey. Do we really appreciate our journey? There was a season in my life which I will never forget. Like millions of people, COVID did hit my family, which brought in uncertainty and financial challenges. And my family included my mom, my dad, my wife, my daughter, my sister, and my niece, except of me. I did all that I could, but unfortunately, I lost my dad in 2021. There was a vacuum in my life. There was an isolation. I really didn't know what the hell is kind of happening in my life. And, I kind of used to go to the bedroom and kind of literally cry like a child. And people say like, men don't cry. Men do cry. We cry, right? Because on one side, the people were kind of saying like, this guy didn't take care of his father, which is why his father passed away. That kind of really hurt me a lot. And in 2022, my wife got into a sepsis shock. And the doctors kind of said like, your wife may or may not survive. It's just 2% hopes. Now imagine what I was going through. And after that, my personal relationship, my health, my finances, everything kind of went for a toss. And I was like, what is happening and why is this happening? And remember, whenever such things happen, God always appoints and sends people who become a great blessing. They prayed with me, they encouraged me, they supported me. But during that process, I was wrestling with one question. Is this all about life? We come, we live, and we leave. Is this all about life? And as I was wrestling with this question, and as I was kind of seeking for an answer, the Almighty did something spectacular. He connected me to a powerful mentor, Mr. Fatah Khan, through Passionpreneur. And from there, my entire perspective of my life changed. Ladies and gentlemen, I stopped counting on my problems. I started counting on my blessings. My confidence increased. My health improved. I stopped focusing on my look or my height, rather started focusing on a right mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, I understood that, we all deserve a beautiful life, but how do you think it is possible? I understood that it is possible through gratitude. When I started practicing gratitude, I realized that if I would have been affected with COVID, ladies and gentlemen, my entire family would have been washed away, including me. And I wouldn't have been standing here right in front of you. Gratitude changed the lens through which I have seen my circumstances. It enabled me to understand that gratitude attracts good health, happiness, love, joy, peace, success, and prosperity. Understand one thing, when you cherish the gift, you cherish the giver. And when the problem hits me, I don't say, why this problem? I kind of say, what is this problem trying to teach me? That is the power of gratitude. Rise through action. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at myself 4 years down the line, I was just an employee living a mediocre life, right? But now I am a different person because I've understood my passion. I've understood my purpose. I've understood what I'm capable of. I've understood, the gifts that the Almighty has kind of blessed me. And believe me, every person sitting over here is blessed with unique gifts. You got to identify them and work towards it. And for me, it was my voice. Like the way one word touched me, I believe that every word, there could be one word that could touch your life. And that's how I kind of started my journey as a motivational speaker. Right, I started recording videos and uploading them. People did mock at me, troll me, and made fun of me, but I didn't stop. I got evidence that people really loved it, and that enabled me, and that's what you get to see on the screen. I started taking passive action, because for me, criticism was not the solution. For me, this is the solution. I got to reach out to people who really need that help. Ladies and gentlemen, but the problem is many people are kind of thinking that they got to feel confident first before taking action, right? But let me tell you, confidence really comes first. It is action that comes first. Before I could start, over here as a TEDx speaker, I was nervous, right? Before I could write a book, I was nervous. But the only difference is I do not allow the fear to kind of disappear. I kind of move on, right? Ladies and gentlemen, why? Because confidence is not built by thinking. It is built by taking action. If a little boy like me, did I say boy? Yeah, I am a boy, right? If a little boy like me could create an impact, so could you. Because every person over here is unique. Every person over here is blessed. Every person has the potential to be, to do, and to have the life that they wish. So at the end, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask you one question. Can you recollect one negative sentence that someone has told you a few years ago? Believe me, that could have had a very negative impact. So imagine one empowering word, what would that do? So write down one sentence that could empower you, that will enable you to change your life. Like the way I always say to myself, I am powerful, I am blessed. Because when you speak these words, they are the words that you're telling to yourself. You're telling the story that you are going to be that. And at the end, what I really want to say is, the eagle was always an eagle. The only thing that it had to do was change its perspective. Maybe that's the reason why we are all over here. Not to be somebody else, but to, remind ourselves of who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, you are not your failure. You are not your fear. You are not public's opinion. You are a star. STAR. So see yourself differently. Talk to yourself powerfully. Appreciate your journey. Rise through action. And at the end, I would like you to know, how do I kind of empower myself? I do it by singing the song, which goes this way. I am the best. My name is Cyril. I am the best. My name is Cyril. I believe in the best, 'cause I deserve the best. I believe in the best, 'cause I deserve the best. So remember, you are a star, and so am I. Thank you, and God bless you.